Welcome to SEC Football Live. My name is Braden Gall. Get to me on Twitter at Braden Gall, and please click that subscribe button if you are new to the program. We do appreciate you joining us. Today on the show, the Florida Gators, one of the most interesting programs in all of college football, a national championship caliber program, but we're not exactly sure how much growth is taking place. Joining us to explain all things Florida, David Waters of Gators Breakdown. Look, there are three programs in the SEC coming into 2024 with coaches that are under the most pressure to win. Sam Pittman, certainly the most pressure to win at Arkansas. Maybe to a lesser extent, Shane Beamer at South Carolina. But certainly Billy Napier is expected to make progress in 2024 at Florida. Now, they have made some progress, right? The offense has gotten better. There are plenty of areas where you can point to this program being better than when he got there. But is it enough? Is it enough to satisfy Gator Nation and Florida fans who expect national championships? Because that's the kind of program Florida is. So for those answers, we've got to turn to David. So here was my conversation. And again, give us a subscription. If you want to listen in podcast form, you can check SEC Football Live out everywhere you get your podcast. But we do appreciate you guys subscribing and maybe giving a share as well. Tell somebody about the program. So today on the show, again, David Waters, Gators Breakdown. Here was my conversation, long-form talk about what is going on in Gainesville. David Waters, Gators Breakdown. Welcome to the show. We do appreciate you giving us some time today, man. How are you?
Pretty good. Man, this a little bit of warm weather after a cold snap. So that's the beauty of living in Florida. You don't know what weather you're going to get.
Well, what do they say about Florida? Just wait 50. If you don't like the weather, wait 15 minutes. That's
Absolutely.
That's the rule. Yeah, it was like 6 degrees in Nashville, and we had 8 inches of snow in one day, which is like double our entire yearly total normally. So but you Florida folks, your cold is a little different than the rest of us, even in Tennessee. So
absolutely. I got to go in life. Never shovel snow, and I think I'm pretty safe on that one.
yes, you are. Well, we're going to get into a lot of stuff. I want to talk about the roster in 2024 and the new SEC and all that other stuff, and where Florida fits into all of that. I have a pretty good idea. I assume you do as well, but I want to start sort of big picture with the progress and the evolution of the program under Billy Napier going into year 3. I think we can talk about some specific stuff here, but I just want to start very broadly with the pulse of the fan base on where he is. There has been progress in lots of areas that's clear, and we'll get to some of that stuff, but it's got to come in the form of wins eventually. So where is the fan base right now on Billy Napier in general?
Knowing that this is a critical year in year 3, and I'd say you're probably about as split as you have been since Billy Napier's been hired. I think everybody acknowledges the issues that he came into and trying to take over for Dan Mullen. And look, he chose to rebuild. He didn't choose to hit the transfer portal very heavy early on. He chose to build through high school recruiting. And now I think as we have come through his first two seasons now, that may not have been the best approach. And some of that is you didn't know how to forecast transfer portal and how to forecast NIL. And then you got like a player like, Trevor Etienne, who's going to your biggest rival in Georgia. You would be able to sell him on, hey, come help us build this thing. You'll be here to help us build. I think some guys like Etienne they're tired of losing. And you're like, hey, I got one more year, so let me go and make the best of that 1 year. So I think Billy Napier's probably learned some harsh realities along with the fan base that, hey, this is a new world of college football. This way you built at Louisiana of trusting relationship, look, all that stuff still has a place, but it's a different world right now. So I do think I still think given some grievance just to learn on the job and know how big of a job this is the first 2 years. But at the same time, Braden, as you said, it ultimately comes down to wins and losses and how Florida has lost games and the teams that they've lost to. A lot of those are inexcusable. And in critical year 3 with the nation's toughest schedule, the way it looks right now, I mean, it's year 3. You've built your roster in your image right now. It is time to take a step, no matter how hard the schedule is.
Well, doesn't it make it easier as a analyst, as someone judging Billy Napier? And I guess that would make sense for the fans too. Doesn't it make it easier that he's sort of in a make or break year? And we could talk about Sam Pittman at Arkansas, maybe to a lesser extent Shane Beamer at South Carolina. But like it's sort of like, look, dude, like we could say all the positive things we want to about the things that you have done well, but at the end of the day, like it almost makes it easier to cover and analyze because it's sort of just like you got to show progress this year or not. And if that's the case, even if you've done a lot of things to set this program up for success in the future, which I think you might agree he has for the next guy, if he's not the guy, again, hypothetically here.
Yeah.
Doesn't it make it easier to analyze the season in that way?
I think so. I think the wrench that's probably in that is AD Scott Strickland. He's going to be patient. I mean, this is his job for a lot of intents and purposes, may be tied to Billy Napier. If there's no pressure on him, how much pressure is there on Billy Napier? Because, he may want to hang on. Of course, I'm sure he wants to hang on to his AD job a little while longer, but he doesn't get a chance to hire a third football coach.
Yeah.
So he's going to probably be a little more patient with Billy Napier. If it's another 6-win season, it's like, all right, well, there is some progress. We are going to a bowl game. It's not where we want to be in year 3. I don't think the fan base mostly will accept that. So I think it's depending on Braden, just how much pressure is on Strickland. How much pressure is the fan base going to put on Billy Napier after 6 wins with this schedule coming up? And I hate to put parameters on it, but it is a tough schedule, and Florida could be a much better team, and the record won't show it because of that crazy November that they have. But I think there's just so many angles to look at Billy Napier and progress. But all in all, for me, as you said, as an analyst, to me, it is kind of cut and dry. I think you've got to have a better record. You've got to show it. Year 3, it doesn't matter what the schedule does. If Florida is Florida, if Florida is on the correct path, you should be better than 6-6, 7-5, no matter how hard that schedule is.
No, I tend to agree with that. Yeah, 5 top 15 teams to finish. We'll get to that. Does Florida have, for those that don't sort of, for fans around the conference, we sort of know that Auburn's boosters like to meddle, that they get involved in coaching hires, they get involved in the firings. Texas A&M's, it was very clear to me that it was not the athletic director who made the decision to fire Jimbo Fisher and hire Mike Elko by the look on his face at the press conference. We know the oil money is driving those things. This is how college football works. It's not unique to any one school. But I think there are programs that have more meddlesome folks and less meddlesome folks. Where does Florida rank on the scale of the big money folks who would be the ones that are sort of putting that pressure on Scott Strickland?
I'd say they don't have as many the big number of those big time boosters. There's plenty of money.
Sure.
I think it's untapped from where it should be. I think there could be more. I mean, look, if you follow Florida on social media, the conversations are out there. It's, hey, here's NIL. Here's how you can help. Could you need to help these boosters, these few select boosters who are kept getting going to over and over again. And those are the same ones that, hey, when something needs to be done, those are the same ones that have to get involved. So it's there. It's untapped. As far as meddling, I think it's there. And they really like Billy Napier. And I think a lot of the probably reputation is to be some of those guys who contribute would rather have a coach they could go have a beer with than win. They want to win their way instead of just winning. And I think that's kind of caused a rift between a lot of the fan base that, can't contribute the big dollars, but want to see the Gators win versus the people who do have some influence.
Are you suggesting playing golf with Billy Napier is more enjoyable than playing golf with Dan Mullen or Urban Meyer? What? I'm shocked by that.
Yeah, maybe. But September through December, I have to start counting for something.
Yes,
and
I agree. Like I only asked that because like Georgia for some reason feels like they let the folks in charge do the job. Yeah. Now it also led to like 30 years and 40 years of not winning championships, but it seems like Georgia is one of the most hands-off sort of program, where Tennessee sometimes is just bonkers. Like the boosters are just way too in charge, and that whole thing. So I always find that dynamic to be incredibly interesting, because that is the pressure we're talking about that would eventually land on an athletic director. It doesn't come from like the message boards, although the big boosters are on those as well.
They are.
it comes from the folks that are writing the checks for the big stuff. That when you go ask somebody for $100 million to build X or to build Y, they want to say in it, and they want to play golf on Monday with the coach and ask him about that play call on third down.
In a tough situation for Florida in this situation, Braden would be, and I hate speaking kind of hypothetical about maybe firing Billy Napier or whatever, but after year 3, if you do, you're paying Dan Mullen, paying Billy Napier, and you're paying you're paying 3 coaches at that point.
There's a lot.
So
There's a lot lined up. If he just gets to, we'll get to this, but we're already
yeah.
kind of ahead of ourselves. But you could get to 7 wins pretty easily, I think, and
Mhm.
it does feel like less pressure. The contract situation. My view of this, and this is ultimately my next question, is that there needed to be so much building done of the program itself following the Dan Mullen regime, and we could talk about recruiting in this, which maybe it's been better, I would argue, than under Dan Mullen for sure. But top 15 classes aren't going to get it done against Georgia over the course of the long term. So while it's been better than Dan Mullen, it's maybe not where it needs to be. At least that's my outside perspective. And then, of course, there's the big NIL stuff. You've got the NCAA thing, which eventually we knew the NCAA was going to have to start pulling on some reins here for this stuff. And obviously, Florida had a high profile situation, which was kind of silly. But where is Florida from an infrastructure standpoint on recruiting, NIL, and collective, which is all about roster management? Where are they today under Billy Napier, and what has he done that, like, from when he got here? Because that was always my thing, is he needs to build that. Is that taking place? Has that happened in your mind?
Yeah, and I do think, kind of going back to our previous point there, a lot of learning on the job in that situation, and that was things he didn't have to deal with at Louisiana, and come to Florida, and that's when transfer portal takes off. That's when NIL takes off, and first you had Gator Collective, and of course that folded with the Rashada situation, and now you have Florida Victorious, which has right up there. I mean, it's from what I can gather, one of the top 10 collectives in the country that Florida has, and they're learning. I still think along the way, I don't think it's where Tennessee is in their NIL, and Oregon and what they have going on as well. But it is getting better, and I think they don't dive for, like, Billy Napier, and I'll take him for his word. I didn't want to believe it at the time. We don't want to get in bidding wars. Well, they have a NFL tiered system of, here's a player position, and this is how much they're worth, and this is we're going to follow this. And fan base may disagree with it, and may keep you from getting some players, but I do think they go with a more pro approach to how they want to build a roster. And in relation to recruiting, Braden, I think for Florida, yeah, you're not where you need to be to compete with Georgia and Alabama, LSU, Texas, Oklahoma coming in. But we know this roster is better than losing to Kentucky and losing to Arkansas.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a. Do Florida fans want to catch up with Georgia? Absolutely. That's the goal. But at this point, you have a roster still good enough to beat those other teams. So the recruiting has got to start paying off to go win those games you're supposed to. Go win the games you're in position to win, more so than, granted, that's where you want to be at the top of the SEC. But right now, recruiting shows, hey, you got to be better than those teams that you're supposed to be beating, and that's not even what's happening right now.
Yeah, I mean, the Arkansas game is the big one, of course, that everybody circles. So again, let me ask this maybe in a different way. If I said Florida was 10th in the SEC out of 14, let's say I'm just making up a number here. Let's say they're 10th in roster management, NIL, collective, and recruiting all together when Billy Napier arrived. And that includes support staff, that includes analysts, that includes scouting departments that have to scout not just high school players, but college players. Would you say that they're 5 or 6 now? Would you say that they're 2 or 3? I mean, Tennessee, the Texas schools, Ole Miss, even though they lost Judkins to Ohio State, is very good. Oh, Missouri's doing a very good job at managing their roster. Some of this is all about state legislation, I acknowledge, but would you say that again, I'm trying to make it very simplified here and reductive, but is that, if they were bottom third, are they now top third in all of those categories in your opinion?
I'd say middle of the pack.
Okay.
Honestly, I don't think they're at bottom. They're obviously better at Mississippi State, South Carolina, Arkansas. They're
Kentucky.
Taking all that into account. Yes. Now you can start questioning player development, and that's why you're losing to Kentucky, 3 years in a row, and an Arkansas game last year. Yeah, of course. But if you want to talk pure garnering talent, gaining talent, I'd say Florida probably middle of the pack in the SEC.
Which is probably not where the Florida Gators program should be.
So
ultimately, that's the problem.
Absolutely. You everybody knows the money this program can invest, needs to invest. You've seen it. It's just not where not where it needs to be right now.
Well, we'll get to the defense, but let's start on offense because this is where there's just clear and obvious development and progression. Graham Mertz, I was born in Madison, Wisconsin. My father's a huge Wisconsin fan. I through osmosis, I watched a lot of Graham Mertz, and he was I didn't recognize him last year.
Yeah.
Totally different player, and the completion percentage and the efficiency and the way he managed the offense, it felt like Billy Napier got to do a lot of the things he wants his offense to do for the first time, and that includes a very talented player in Anthony Richardson. So, that's clear progress. That's one of the few things he can say. Look what we've done with this, and he's coming back next year. Now, you mentioned you lose Etienne, of course, to an arch rival. That hurts, but offensively, I don't think if you ask the average SEC fan outside of Gainesville, like, hey, where was Florida ranked in yards per play on offense the last couple of years? I guarantee you they would not tell you that Florida's one of the top offenses in the conference, but they are. And so Graham Mertz coming back, what are expectations for the offense, and can they win games? There's a lot of swing games on this schedule when you look at Mississippi State, and you mentioned Kentucky. These are not supposed to be swing games, but I think LSU and Ole Miss are swing games.
Yeah.
If you look at these games, can they win them with offense and Graham Mertz and having a quarterback that is, in what is going to be a very good quarterback conference next year, one of the better quarterbacks in the league?
No, I don't think so. And that's not a slam on Graham Mertz. I just say that's what we saw last year. Going to your point, Braden, I think there is a step, and I think he will take a step. How big is that step? I still think that's to be determined. I had him, shameless plug, I had him on the podcast about a month ago on Gators Breakdown. So if you want more extensive look at things that he's looking to improve on, of course, you can go listen to that. But highlights from that are, it is, taking maybe some more chances and maybe testing the ball down the field a little bit more. Part of that completion percentage you were talking about, a lot of that was because he's settled and trying to give Ricky Pearsall a chance to make a play or Trey Wilson to make a play. But now, he brings in Chimere Dike, which is a wide receiver there at Wisconsin who put up some really good numbers a couple years ago, didn't really fit into the new offensive style at Wisconsin last year. So transfers to be with us quarterback there, Graham Mertz from a couple years ago at Wisconsin. So a familiarity there, maybe a growth with Trey Wilson, who was a all freshman receiver last year as well. So you can see where Graham Mertz can be better. The offensive line's got to help protect him as well, but he wants to get better at testing the ball down the field a bit more. So I do think there is growth, but just kind of not to bury the lead, and I know we'll get to it, but it's kind of what we saw last year, Braden, with even though he would play good and he would go throw for 300 yards, close to 400 yards, and the defense is giving up 500 yards, it just kind of gets, it gets too hard to overcome. And we've seen that for Florida the last couple of years. It's not just a Graham Mertz thing. It's a Florida thing lately of offense doing enough, but the defense is kind of letting them down. So while there are steps, I think given how difficult the schedule is, even another jump on offense, if there's no jump on defense, it just kind of gets, I think, blanketed.
But it gives you at least like a known variable, if nothing else. Like you're going to get efficient quarterback play, and you're going to score some points, and the offense will be prepared and probably managed very well. Now, some of the other things, the special teams, like some of the mistakes last year are some of the things that really caught my eye. Guys, again, we all point to the one against Utah with two guys on the field. So ultimately, my first question about the defense is, how would you evaluate Austin Armstrong? You're bringing in Ron Roberts, of course, from Auburn to help with that. Some veteran experience is certainly probably a good thing. How would you evaluate the staff's job on defense again, throughout the course of Napier's tenure?
Yeah, I mean, they've made a ton of changes on that side of the ball. As you mentioned, bringing Ron Roberts in, but Will Harris comes in as defensive back coach. Corey Raymond goes back to LSU. You got Chapman bringing him in from Tulane there as far as defensive line coach. When Sean Spencer goes to Texas A&M, Jay Bateman, the linebacker coach, goes to Texas A&M. So it's a complete new look on the staff as far as the defensive side goes. They hit the transfer portal hard, and I think brought in some really good players here. First off, beating Grayson Howard there from transferring from South Carolina, kind of close to my heart here in Jacksonville. So I was glad to see him come back home there. Because I got to know him a little bit, but good for him to come back home where Florida needs a whole lot of help at linebacker, so they don't have to rely on a great true freshman class that's coming in, but you don't want to have to rely on them. So Shamar James coming back from injury as well, one of the SEC's best linebackers. So you got a little bit worried there, but it sounds like a broken record, Braden. It's like they can't be any worse, and they find a way
Yeah.
to be worse. But they've hit the transfer portal. They've rehauled the staff there, so you gotta hope Austin Armstrong, second year of experience, and Ron Roberts is somebody he's looked up to. I mean, they were there at Louisiana under
Yep.
Billy Napier, early in Billy Napier's tenure. There is a familiarity there. Not everybody's learning something new here. The players are 2 years under Austin Armstrong. Maybe Ron Roberts can unlock something with all the experience he brings in this defense. I think what we still want to learn is how is that going to work? I mean, Austin Armstrong was the defensive coordinator last year. You do bring kind of his mentor in. What's the responsibilities going to be like? Is there going to be? I don't think there will be a rift. I mean, I'm sure this was well researched and well thought out, and there's really good friendships here to go along. But when Roberts kind of come in and take control, is it a 50-50 split? How does a 50-50 split work? We haven't got a chance to talk to Billy Napier about how this will work out yet. So I think that's coming up. Probably one of the biggest storylines going into spring practices. What's this defense going to look like as far as all the transfers they brought in, and how's the coaching staff responsibilities going to be broken up?
It's funny. Like you beat Tennessee early. You could see the aggressiveness. That was what Austin Armstrong preached when he got there, and then it sort of just kind of sputtered. Right?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the right word over the last, and maybe that's too kind of a word. So philosophically, I'm fascinated to see what they do because they do have some deficiencies. You mentioned the portal, of course. Florida, they're like 8 of their top 11 are in the portal are all on defense. Most of the top players in the portal are on defense. So
Yeah.
it's hard. Like I think it's hard to, it's funny. LSU's kind of going through the same thing. Their defense last year, absolutely atrocious. They hire a new coach. I think they upgraded their coordinator situation, so they're going to be better. How much better is sort of going to dictate where they are. But they also tried to do the same thing last year by, adding a bunch of portal players to change their secondary, and it didn't work.
It didn't work. Yep.
So I don't
the
know.
thing for Florida, for I think the weird thing is kind of going back to last year, they actually were a better defense down to down, but then they would give up the 40, 50-yard play just out of nowhere. And that was the consistent worst part of the defense. They actually were better, but it got erased by giving up the explosive plays, game in and game out.
Well, every coach I've ever spoken with is always mentioned. There's a few things they always talk about, right? It's like, turnovers and mistakes and penalties. It's the same kind of cliches. And then they're always, now the new one in 2020, let's say the 2020s, is like, X plays, got to stop with the X plays.
Yeah.
And that's certainly the case there. So ultimately, when I look at the schedule, I don't think there's a single team in America that would trade schedules. I think you tweeted as much with Florida. That month of November, I don't have to tell any Florida fans about it. But it's funny that I look at home games against Miami and Texas A&M as opportunities. Texas A&M is going to be better, but maybe not by week 3.
Yeah.
Miami, I don't trust Mario Cristobal, but they've got a lot of talent. So I think they can win both of those games. And I feel like if they win both of those games at home and then they sort of do what they're supposed to do, and I don't mean that like an old school Florida sense, but I just mean like win the games they're favored in and maybe lose the games that they're obviously underdogs in, Texas, Georgia, etc. Maybe a split with LSU and Ole Miss. Like I see a path to hitting the over on the win total and 7-5 pretty easily, actually. So that maybe puts 8-4 in reach. Is that crazy to look at that if the defense is just average in the SEC?
Well, if the offense takes another step, and I think we can't overlook DJ Lagway comes in as well, and we talked about Graham Mertz, but is he too good to keep off the field as well? And I think where Florida may need some help in the run game, can they turn to DJ Lagway at the quarterback spot to help get the run game going as well? And so you mentioned that, can he be ready to go by beginning of the season where you got some home games, a kind of friendly environment for him? It shouldn't be too much for him there against Miami and against Texas A&M in the first month of the season. How much pressure is on Billy Napier and Mario Cristobal for game one here? I mean, they both been kind of building, I think, for this third year, and they're recruiting to kind of take off for both these programs. Now, Cam Ward coming in from Miami. Florida should have. You got home field advantage. Cam Ward making his first start for Miami here in the Swamp. I mean, I'm very interested to see what the line would be for that game. I could see it being a pick 'em just because of all the questions surrounding Florida or anything like that. Yeah. But I think you get that game, you probably can build some momentum. I mean, Florida 2 years in a row, first year, game 1 versus Utah, win that early season game at home. Last year, Tennessee's your first big game at home. You win that game. So there's kind of been a trend for Billy Napier to win that first big home game of the year. Can it continue into year 3? Worry there is they just turn around and laid an egg right after that. But maybe you build that momentum, and you know how critical this year is. But like you said, it kind of does line up friendly in the first half of the schedule.
Yep.
You get Miami game 1. Can you take advantage? You get Elko early on. UCF comes to the Swamp. You got to go to Tennessee. 7-5 is a record that's thrown out a lot for Florida. But when you look at November, and there's those 5 games right there, does that mean you have to start 7-0 to go 7-5? I mean, it would be kind of reminiscent of this past season. You know, Florida's 5-2 going into the Georgia game, feeling really good. There's some upset picks of Florida beating Georgia, and all of a sudden you don't win another game. It's so if you start 7-0, how would it? In a way, if Florida starts 7-0, of course, I'd hope Florida ends up better than 7-5. But that's going to be an interesting case study. If Florida starts 7-0, but you go 0-4 in November, what's the feeling like? I mean, of course, how they look is probably going a long way in that. But 7-5 after starting a 7-0, I don't think we'll start 7-0. They'll probably lose a game somewhere. But
6-1 is how I project it, and then I think. Because I think Florida State's taken a huge step back. So I think LSU, Ole Miss, Florida State, I think you get one of those for sure. And best case scenario, maybe you get 2. So again, that's where 8 wins comes into play. But I think to your point about Lagway, and we can wrap this entire thing up here. If they're 7-5, there's not as much pressure on the athletic director to then put pressure on the head coach. Nothing gets a fan base more excited than flashes of brilliance from a freshman quarterback who's used sparingly. It's like a drug that you just like slow drip into the veins. Like, oh, he only plays 4 games, so he maintains his redshirt year, but he helps you win in a couple of spots. He looks pretty good.
We saw it 2 years ago. Dan Mullen gets fired, but how excited were we for Anthony Richardson?
Yes. Well, I mean, you don't have to talk to Tennessee fans about Nico, and
right.
You know, like Oklahoma fans about Jackson Arnold, and like there's a lot of good young talented guys that are going to get those. Nothing gets a fan base going better than just like, oh, he's not ready yet, but we're going to give you some flashes of it. And he goes 7-5, and they pull an upset at home, and looks like you got your quarterback of the future. Is that enough then for everyone to say, okay, all right, we'll do it one more time, let's run it back?
I think so. And personally, for me, it is, if you could tread water enough this year, I think Billy Napier deserves the chance to see what he can do with DJ Lagway. Now, it will have to pay immediate dividends in 2025. But if you can tread water enough, and if it's still, whatever this feeling Gator Nation has right now, if it's still the same feeling next November, ride with him and see what you can get out of DJ Lagway with him. And DJ Lagway is tied to Billy Napier. He loves Billy Napier. He's come to Florida. The recruiting class in some ways falls apart. He still stays. He still sticks. He wants to be with Billy Napier. So there's a belief in the quarterback for the head coach. If he can tread water, I do think there's enough there to say, all right, you've got to see him with his hand-picked quarterback. Now, it is kind of weird to me. We're heading into year 3 for Billy Napier, and we still have not seen his quarterback yet. 1 year of Anthony Richardson, 2 years of Graham Mertz. It's going to be, if he gets year 4, it'll be year 4 before we see him with his hand-picked quarterback as a high school recruit. So maybe that's enough of a leash to say, all right, you got to take that step with him his first year starting.
And still a top 5 pick with one of them, and major progress with the other one, and one of the more efficient players in the conference. So it's going to be a fascinating year in Florida. I think they're one of the most interesting teams in all of the conference, all of the country. I think they're going to be better than people think, but I wonder how much the schedule limits that. So we'll see. We'll see about the defense. Gators Breakdown, of course, great product for you guys who are out there who are not Gators fans, who want to check out the Florida Gators. Make sure you check out David's work, man. Thank you so much, man. We appreciate you, and have a good one, my man. Good to see you.
All right, Braden. Thanks, man.